Are you sure we're doing the right thing?
One night in Seoul's red light district, a sex worker made a choice that should have killed her. She didn't know the man she refused was the city's most ruthless mafia boss. But what happened next will leave you speechless. If you believe redemption can find us in our darkest hour, subscribe to this channel. Stay with me, and let's feel this story together. The dressing room smelled of hairspray and expensive perfume, the kind that clings to silk and skin long after the night ends. Tilda sat before the mirror, her dark skin glowing under the harsh fluorescent lights as she carefully applied another layer of red lipstick. Her reflection stared back at her with practiced composure, the face of a woman who had learned to separate herself from what she did to survive. "Just smile and pour drinks," Hannah said from behind her, adjusting the clasp of Tilda's dress with gentle, motherly hands. Her voice carried a weight that made Tilda pause mid-stroke with her makeup brush. The older Korean woman's reflection appeared beside hers in the mirror, her eyes serious despite her soft smile. "A VIP is coming tonight. Very dangerous man. Don't look him in the eye too long." Tilda laughed, trying to lighten the sudden tension in the room. "Oh please, Hannah. I've handled dangerous men before. 3 years in the city, I think I know the type." Hannah's hands stilled on her shoulders, gripping just a little too tight. "Not like this one," she whispered, her voice dropping so the other girls wouldn't hear. "This one owns people.
He doesn't ask. He takes.
And when he's done, sometimes those people disappear." The room suddenly felt colder despite the warmth of bodies and bright lights. Tilda met Hannah's eyes in the mirror and saw genuine fear there. "Who is he?" "Ji-sung," Hannah said simply, as if the name itself was explanation enough. She squeezed Tilda's shoulders once more before stepping back. "Just be smart tonight. Be invisible if you can." But Tilda couldn't be invisible. Not with her skin, not with her accent, not in a country where she stood out in every room she entered. She had learned to make peace with that 3 years ago when her work visa expired and desperation led her through doors she never imagined she'd walk through. She had learned to survive in the margins, to send money home to Ghana, where her mother was sick and her younger siblings needed school fees. She had learned to smile when her heart was breaking and to pour drinks for men who saw her as exotic, as other, as something to possess for an evening. The other girls chattered nervously as they finished their preparations, their Korean too fast for Tilda to catch every word, but she understood the tone. Fear mixed with excitement. The kind of energy that comes before something dangerous and inevitable. The club's main floor pulsed with low music and amber light when the manager finally called them out. Velvet Room was upscale by Seoul standards, catering to businessmen and politicians who wanted discretion with their indiscretions. The carpet was thick, the lighting dim, and the private rooms soundproofed. Tilda had worked here for 6 months, ever since Hannah helped her get the job after her previous salon let her go for being too foreign, too difficult to market. The manager, a stern woman in her 50s who wore her hair in a tight bun, lined them up in the hallway. 5 girls tonight, all dressed in evening gowns that walked the line between elegant and available. "When Ji-sung arrives, you go in one at a time," she instructed in Korean, her eyes scanning them critically. "Smile. Pour drinks. Leave when dismissed. Do not speak unless spoken to." Tilda's heart beat faster despite her attempts to stay calm. She had seen dangerous men before. She had poured drinks for Yakuza members, for corrupt officials, for married chaebols slumming in Gangnam. But something about the energy tonight felt different, like the air before a thunderstorm. The VIP room was all black leather and dark wood, a space designed for secrets. When Tilda's turn came, she was the last girl called. The others had already been dismissed, filing out with relief evident on their faces. The manager gestured for her to enter, and Tilda smoothed her dress, lifted her chin, and walked in with the confidence she had learned to perform. Ji-sung sat at the center of a curved leather sofa, 3 men flanking him on either side. But it was clear who commanded the room. He was young, maybe 27 or 28, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than Tilda made in 6 months. His face was beautiful in a severe way, all sharp angles and cold eyes that tracked her movement from the moment she entered. He didn't smile. didn't acknowledge his men. Just watched her with the intensity of a predator assessing prey. Tilda bowed slightly, the way she had been taught, and moved to the low table to pour whiskey from the expensive bottle already waiting there. Her hands were steady, her movements practiced. She could feel his eyes on her, but she kept her gaze down, professional, invisible. "You're not Korean," he said suddenly, his voice low and smooth, speaking English with barely an accent. Tilda's hands paused for just a fraction of a second before continuing to pour. "No, sir. I'm from Ghana. Look at me." It wasn't a request. Tilda's training screamed to her to obey, but something about the command made her skin prickle with warning. She lifted her eyes slowly and met his gaze. His eyes were dark, almost black in the dim light, and utterly unreadable. For a moment, something flickered in his expression, something she couldn't name. Interest, perhaps, or recognition of something he hadn't expected to see. The moment stretched between them, heavy and strange. His men shifted uncomfortably, sensing something in the air that Tilda couldn't quite identify. "Come with me tonight," Ji-sung said finally, leaning back against the leather. "Name your price." The room went silent except for the muffled bass from the club beyond the walls.
Tilda's throat went dry.
She had been propositioned before, plenty of times, but never like this. Never with such casual certainty, as if her agreement was already assumed. She thought of Hannah's warning. She thought of the fear in the other girl's eyes. She thought of the rumors she had heard whispered in Korean, words like ruthless and untouchable, and disappeared. "I'm sorry," she said carefully, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. "I don't do overnight bookings." One of the men inhaled sharply. Another's hand moved slightly toward his jacket. Ji-sung himself went very still, his expression shifting from neutral to something far more dangerous. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You're refusing me?" he asked quietly, his voice like silk over steel. Tilda's heart hammered against her ribs, but she had learned long ago that showing fear to dangerous men only made things worse. "I'm just not available tonight, sir," she said, keeping her voice respectful but firm. Perhaps one of the other girls would be better suited. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Ji-sung stared at her with an expression that could have been anger or curiosity or something else entirely. Then, without warning, he stood. His men immediately rose with him, their movements synchronized and tense. He walked toward her, and Tilda forced herself not to step back. He stopped close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive and subtle, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. His gaze moved over her face, searching for something. "Interesting," he said softly, then turned and walked out without another word. His lieutenant, a hard-faced man with a scar along his jaw, threw a thick envelope of cash on the table and followed. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like a verdict. Tilda's legs nearly gave out. She grabbed the edge of the table, her hands shaking so badly she almost knocked over the whiskey glass. What had she just done? Who did she think she was, refusing a man like that? Girls disappeared for less. Girls were found in the Han River for less. When she finally made it back to the dressing room, Hannah took one look at her face and went pale. "What happened?" "I said no," Tilda whispered, sinking onto the bench. "He wanted me to go with him, and I said no." Hannah's hand flew to her mouth.
"Oh God."
"Tilda, do you know what you've done? Do you know who that was?"
"You told me."
Ji-sung. "But I couldn't, Hannah. I looked at him, and I just couldn't." The older woman paced the small room, wringing her hands. "You need to leave.
"Right now."
Go home. Don't come back here."
"What?"
"No, I need this job. I need the money." "You don't understand," Hannah hissed, grabbing Tilda's shoulders. "Men like Ji-sung, they don't accept rejection. It's not about you saying no. It's about him looking weak in front of his men. You embarrassed him." "I didn't mean to," Tilda said, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I was just scared." Hannah's expression softened slightly. She pulled Tilda into a brief, tight hug. "I know, honey. I know. Just please, be careful going home. Don't walk alone. Take a taxi directly to your door. But Tilda couldn't afford a taxi, not with the rent due and money she needed to send home. So when her shift ended at 2 in the morning, she wrapped her coat tight around her dress and started the familiar walk through Gangnam's quieter streets toward the subway station. The night air was cool against her face, carrying the smell of street food from the late-night vendors and the chemical sweetness of the Han River in the distance. She had walked maybe 3 blocks when she noticed the car. A black sedan, expensive-looking, rolling slowly along the curb about 20 meters behind her. Her pace quickened. So did the cars. Tilda's mouth went dry. She turned down a side street, and the car turned too. Panic flooded her system. She spotted a 24-hour convenience store ahead, its bright lights like a beacon. She practically ran inside, startling the teenage clerk who looked up from his phone with wide eyes. Tilda grabbed a bottle of water she didn't want and moved to the back of the store, positioning herself where she could see the street through the window. The black car had stopped. Waiting. She paid for the water with shaking hands and asked the clerk in her broken Korean if there was a back exit. He pointed to a door behind the refrigerators, looking concerned but not concerned enough to ask questions. Seoul had taught Tilda that people generally didn't want to get involved in other people's problems. The back alley was dark and smelled of rotting food and stale beer. Tilda's heels clicked against the wet pavement as she hurried toward what she hoped was a connecting street. She was halfway down the alley when she heard footsteps behind her. Multiple sets. Heavy. Deliberate. She turned and saw 3 men blocking the alley entrance behind her. They weren't wearing suits like Ji-sung's men had been, but something about the way they moved, the way they spread out to block any escape route, told her exactly who had sent them. The lead man said something in Korean, too fast for her to understand, but his tone was clear enough. This wasn't a conversation. This was a collection. Please, Tilda said, backing up until her shoulders hit the brick wall behind her. I didn't mean to offend anyone. I'll apologize. I'll do whatever he wants. The men kept advancing. One of them pulled something from his jacket, and Tilda couldn't tell if it was a weapon or zip ties, but either way her mind screamed danger. She opened her mouth to scream, though she doubted anyone in Seoul would come running for a foreign woman screams in an alley at 2 a.m. Let her go. The voice cut through the darkness like a blade, cold and absolute. All 3 men froze instantly. Tilda's eyes darted past them to see Ji-sung himself stepping into the mouth of the alley alone, his hands in his pockets like he was out for a casual evening stroll. The lead man spun around, bowing quickly. Boss, we were just... I sent you to make sure she got home safely. Ji-sung interrupted, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of fury that made even Tilda shiver. Not to terrify her in an alley, like common thugs. Is this how my organization operates now? The men looked at each other, uncertain. One started to explain in rapid Korean, but Ji-sung held up a hand, and they fell silent immediately. He walked past them without a glance, stopping a few feet from where Tilda pressed against the wall, her chest heaving with fear and adrenaline. Get in my car, he said in English, his tone brooking no argument. I'll take you home. Tilda stared at him. Was this a trick? Was this somehow worse than the 3 men who had been advancing on her? I'd rather walk, she managed to say, her voice shaking. Something that might have been respect flickered across Ji-sung's face. With them following you all night? Making sure you don't sleep, don't feel safe, don't breathe without looking over your shoulder? He shook his head slightly. I'm offering you a ride home. Not asking for anything else. Get in the car. Tilda looked at the 3 men, who were now studiously examining the ground. She looked at Ji-sung, whose expression was unreadable, but whose presence had made armed men freeze with a single word. She thought about Hannah's warnings, about everything she knew about men like this, about survival and choices, and the space between the two. Where's your car? She asked finally. His car was a black Mercedes that probably cost more than Tilda would earn in her entire life. The leather interior smelled new and expensive. Ji-sung held the door open for her with surprising courtesy, then walked around to the driver's side. His men had disappeared, vanished into the Seoul night like ghosts. They drove in silence for the first few minutes, the city lights streaming past the windows in blurs of neon and shadow. Tilda kept her hands folded in her lap, very aware of the man beside her, of the controlled power in the way he handled the car, the way his jaw was set in a hard line. "Where do you live?" he asked finally. Tilda gave him an intersection in Itiwan, not her exact address. Even now, even after he had called off his men, she wasn't stupid enough to lead him directly to her door. He nodded slightly, acknowledging her caution without comment, and adjusted their route. "You were smart to refuse me earlier," he said after another stretch of silence, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Tilda blinked, certain she had misheard.
What?
"At the club. You were smart to say no." His voice was matter-of-fact, as if they were discussing the weather. "Most women in your position, they see the money, the power, and they convince themselves that makes it safe. That makes it worth it. You didn't. Then why did your men follow me?" Ji-sung's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "I didn't send them to hurt you. I sent them to make sure you got home safely. Other men at that club, men who saw you refuse me, they might have seen that as permission to try their own luck. I wanted to make sure no one touched you." Tilda turned to stare at his profile, trying to understand this contradiction of a man. "You're telling me you sent armed men to protect me? After I rejected you?" He glanced at her briefly before returning his eyes to the road. "You're the first woman in 5 years who looked at me and chose fear over greed. That takes courage. Or perhaps stupidity. I haven't decided which." They pulled up to the intersection she had indicated, and Ji-sung put the car in park, but left the engine running. Tilda reached for the door handle, then paused. "Why are you being kind to me?" "I'm not kind," he said sharply, turning to look at her fully for the first time since they had gotten in the car. "Don't mistake this for kindness. I'm a lot of things, but kind isn't one of them. I run drugs and guns through 5 districts. I've killed men who crossed me. I will kill more before I die. Kindness is a luxury I can't afford. But you stopped your men from hurting me. That's not kindness. That's practicality. You said no. You drew a line. I can respect a line. Most people in my world don't know how to draw them anymore." His eyes held hers, and Tilda saw something in them she hadn't expected. Loneliness, perhaps. Or exhaustion. The kind that came from carrying violence for so long you forgot what peace felt like. She opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. Before she closed it, she leaned down to look at him one more time. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For whatever this was. Thank you." He nodded once, a sharp economical movement, and she shut the door. The Mercedes pulled away smoothly, its taillights disappearing into Seoul's endless stream of traffic. Tilda stood on the street corner for a long moment, her heart still racing, her mind trying to process what had just happened. She had looked the devil in the eye, and he had driven her home. The next morning, Tilda woke to 17 missed calls and twice as many text messages. Most were from Hannah, each one increasingly frantic. The last one simply read, "Call me. Please. I need to know you're alive." Tilda called her back while making instant coffee in her tiny studio apartment, phone wedged between her shoulder and ear. "I'm fine," she said when Hannah answered on the first ring.
I'm alive.
"I'm home. Thank God," Hannah breathed out. "I didn't sleep. When you didn't answer, I thought." She didn't finish the sentence. What happened? Tilda told her about the men in the alley, about Ji-sung appearing like some dark avenging angel, about the car ride that made no sense. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "Tilda," Hannah said finally, her voice strange. "You need to not come back to the club."
What? Why?
"Because the owner called me this morning. Said Ji-sung's visit brought too much attention. Said having you there is too complicated."
She paused.
"You're fired." The coffee cup slipped from Tilda's hand, shattering against the linoleum floor. Hot liquid splashed across her bare feet, but she barely felt it. "Fired? But I need that job. I need the money. My mother's treatment, my siblings' school fees." "I know. Honey. I know." Hannah's voice was thick with sympathy. "I told the owner it wasn't fair, but he wouldn't listen. He's scared of Ji-sung's attention. scared of what it means to have him interested in one of his girls. Interested? Tilda laughed bitterly. He drove me home. That's not interest. That's just him cleaning up his men's mess. Maybe, Hannah said, but she didn't sound convinced. Look, I know a place in Itiwan. Foreigner-friendly bar. They need girls who speak English. The pay isn't as good, but it's something. I'll text you the address. After they hung up, Tilda sank onto her narrow bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling. 3 years in Seoul, and she was starting over again. 3 years of learning to navigate a world that didn't want her, that saw her as temporary, as other, as something to use and discard. She thought about calling her mother, hearing her voice, but what would she say? That she had lost another job? That she was barely surviving in a country that would never accept her?
She didn't call.
Instead, she cleaned up the broken coffee cup, dressed in her cheapest clothes, and went out to look for work. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of rejection. She tried restaurants, retail stores, other clubs. Most took one look at her and said they weren't hiring. A few were more honest, told her straight out that customers preferred Korean girls, that her skin would scare away business, that her accent was too strong. One manager, a woman who looked like she had seen too much of life's ugliness, told her almost kindly that she should just go back to Africa, that Korea wasn't a place for people like her. People like her. As if being black and female and struggling made her a category, a problem, a thing to be solved by disappearing. On the 4th day, she walked into a Western-style bar in Itaewon called Velvet Room, the place Hannah had mentioned. It was smaller than the Gangnam Club, less polished, catering to foreign businessmen and English teachers and military personnel on leave. The manager was a Korean woman in her 50s with tired eyes and hair dyed an improbable shade of red. You speak English? The woman asked in Korean, looking Tilda up and down with the assessing gaze of someone who had hired and fired 1,000 girls. Fluently, Tilda replied in Korean. And I understand Korean well enough to work. You have experience? 3 years. I know how to handle difficult customers. I know when to smile and when to call for backup. I'm reliable and I don't drink on the job. The manager lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and studied Tilda through the smoke. We get American military guys here. Sometimes they get handsy with the foreign girls. Think they can do whatever they want because they're not in Kansas anymore.
Can you handle that?
Tilda thought about the club in Gangnam, about the men who had cornered her in alleys, about every moment of the last 3 years that had required her to swallow her dignity and smile. Yes, she said.
I can handle it.
You start tomorrow night. 8 p.m., don't be late. It wasn't until Tilda was back on the street, the Itaewon crowds flowing around her like water around a stone, that she let herself cry. Just a little. Just enough to release the pressure that had been building in her chest for 4 days. Then she wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and went to the convenience store to buy rice and eggs for dinner. Survival was a muscle, and she had been exercising it for 3 years. She could keep going. She had to. Velvet Room was different from the Gangnam Club in ways both obvious and subtle. The lighting was brighter, the music louder, the alcohol cheaper. The girls were a mix of nationalities, Korean and Russian and Filipino, all of them working the margins of Seoul's foreign district. The customers were rowdier, less polished, but also somehow less dangerous. They were men looking to forget their problems for a few hours, not men who created problems for others. Tilda fell into the rhythm quickly. She learned which customers wanted conversation and which just wanted their glasses refilled. She learned how to deflect wandering hands with a smile and a joke, how to laugh at terrible pickup lines, how to make men feel interesting while extracting tips. It was exhausting in a different way than the Gangnam Club had been, but it was survivable. She had been working at Velvet Room for just over a week when Ji-sung walked in. Tilda saw him before he saw her, and her heart stopped in her chest. He was with 4 men this time, all of them in expensive suits that looked out of place among the casual crowd. They were clearly there for business, not pleasure, heading toward a private booth in the back where a group of Japanese men in equally expensive suits were already waiting. Tilda tried to make herself invisible, to fade into the background the way she had learned to do. But the bar manager spotted her and hurried over, her face tight with stress. The VIP table, she hissed. They need a server. You speak the best English. I can't, Tilda started to say, but the manager was already pushing her toward the booth. Ji-sung looked up as she approached, and his expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for her to read. Surprise, definitely. Something that might have been pleasure. And underneath it all, that same dangerous intensity she remembered from their first meeting. The Japanese men were already deep in conversation with one of Ji-sung's lieutenants, their voices low and tense. Tilda set down the tray of whiskey and glasses with hands that only shook a little. She began pouring with the mechanical precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times, focusing on the drinks, on anything except the weight of Ji-sung's gaze. You changed jobs, he said in English, pitched low enough that only she would hear over the music. I had to, she replied without looking up. Because of me? Her hands paused for just a second before continuing to pour.
Because I said no to you.
Because your visit brought attention. Because I'm always the one who's expendable. She set the last glass down and started to retreat, but his voice stopped her. Whiskey.
Neat. For me.
Tilda poured him a separate glass, and when she set it in front of him, their eyes met. For a moment, the noise of the bar, the business meeting, all of it faded into background static. There was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before, something almost vulnerable. I'm sorry, he said, so quietly she almost didn't hear. For what my attention cost you. She didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to respond to an apology from a man like him. So she just nodded and retreated, feeling his eyes follow her across the room. The meeting went on for 2 hours. Tilda tried to focus on her other tables, on the American soldiers celebrating someone's birthday, on the English teachers drowning their midweek stress in cheap beer. But her awareness kept drifting back to that booth, to Ji-sung sitting like a dark star around which everything else orbited. When his group finally stood to leave, Tilda was wiping down the bar. She didn't see him approach until he was standing right beside her. She jumped slightly, and he raised his hands in a gesture of peace. I'm not here to cause trouble, he said. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and set it on the bar between them. For the other night. For the job you lost. Tilda stared at the envelope. Even from here, she could see the thickness of it, the promise of bills that could solve so many of her problems. But she thought about Hannah's warnings, about the cost of accepting things from men like Ji-sung, about the invisible strings that came attached to every gift. I can't take that, she said. It's not payment. It's an apology. His voice was patient, almost gentle. You lost income because I was careless.
Let me fix that.
Fixing it would be telling your organization, I'm off limits. Not giving me money. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes.
You're right. Consider it done.
But take the money anyway. You've earned it. He left before she could refuse again, disappearing into the Seoul night with his men flanking him like dark shadows. Tilda stood at the bar, staring at the envelope, knowing she should throw it away, knowing she should want nothing to do with him. She opened it. Inside was 5 million won, nearly $4,000, more money than she had seen in one place since coming to Korea. Also inside was a business card, plain white with nothing but a phone number printed in black. No name, no title, just 10 digits that felt like a doorway to somewhere she shouldn't go. She took the money home. She told herself she would use it for her mother's medicine, for her siblings' school fees, for the rent she was behind on. She told herself it was practical, not personal. She told herself she wouldn't call the number. She was lying to herself on all 3 counts. The anonymous text messages started 2 nights later. The first one came while Tilda was getting ready for her shift. That money is blood money. Stay away from Ji-sung. She deleted it without responding. The second came an hour later. He destroys everything he touches. And the third, arriving while she was pouring drinks for a table of rowdy businessmen. You're not special. You're just next. Tilda blocked the number, but the messages found her anyway, coming from different numbers each time, always with the same warning. Someone was watching her. Someone knew about Ji-sung's visit, about the money, about everything. She lasted 5 days before calling the number on the business card. She told herself she just wanted answers, wanted to know who was threatening her and why. She told herself it had nothing to do with the way his apology had sounded sincere, or the way he had looked at her like she was a person rather than a transaction. He answered on the second ring. "I was wondering if you would call." His voice was warm, almost amused, and something in Tilda's chest loosened at the sound. "I can't accept your money," she said, even though she had already spent half of it on bills. "And I need to know who's sending me threatening messages about you."
A pause.
"What messages?" She read him a few of the texts, and she could hear the shift in his breathing, the way his voice went cold and focused. "How long has this been happening?" 5 days. Different numbers each time. "They know about the money. They know you drove me home." She hesitated. "Who else knows about that night?" "My men. And apparently someone who wants to scare you away from me." Ji-sung's voice was thoughtful now, calculating. "Where are you?" "At home."
Why?
"Stay there. I'm coming over." "You don't know where I live." She heard the smile in his voice. "You gave me an intersection in Itaewon. I had my men find out the rest. For your safety." That should have scared her. Should have sent her running. Instead, Tilda found herself saying, "Fine.
Come.
But you're explaining everything when you get here." He arrived 30 minutes later, alone this time, dressed more casually than she had seen him before in dark jeans and a leather jacket. He looked younger like this, less like a crime lord and more like just a man. Tilda led him into her tiny studio apartment, suddenly aware of how small it was, how shabby compared to the world he lived in. Ji-sung looked around with interest, taking in the single room that served as her bedroom, living room, and kitchen. The bathroom was barely bigger than a closet. The walls were thin enough to hear her neighbors arguing, and the whole place smelled faintly of the kimchi fermenting in the refrigerator. But he didn't comment on any of that. Instead, he focused on the small details that made it hers: the photos of her family taped to the wall, the half-finished sewing project on the table, the English and Korean textbooks stacked by the bed. "You're teaching yourself Korean," he observed, picking up one of the textbooks. "I have to. No one's going to hire a tutor for an illegal immigrant sex worker." Tilda crossed her arms, defensive. "And before you offer to pay for lessons, I don't want your money. I want to know who's threatening me." Ji-sung set the book down carefully and pulled out his phone. He showed her the messages she had forwarded to him. These were sent from burner phones, but they all came from the same area.
Gangnam.
"Near your old club. You think it's someone from there?" "I think it's someone who knew you worked there. Someone who saw us together." He looked at her directly. "Did you tell anyone about that night? About me driving you home?" "Just Hannah. She's the only person I trust in this city." "Hannah," Ji-sung repeated, his expression thoughtful. "The older woman? Korean, maybe late 30s?
Yes.
She helped me get the job at my new place. She's been like a mother to me." "Tell me about her." So Tilda did. She told him how Hannah had taken her under her wing when she first started at the Gangnam Club, how she had taught her the unspoken rules of survival, how she had protected her from the worst customers and warned her about dangerous men. How Hannah had been the first person in Seoul to treat her like a human being rather than a commodity. Ji-sung listened without interrupting, but something in his expression shifted as she talked. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Does Hannah know you called me tonight?"
No. Why?
"Because if the messages stop after tonight, after I came here, we'll know whoever's sending them is watching you closely. And the only person who knows your schedule, your habits, where you live, that's Hannah." Tilda shook her head immediately.
No.
"Hannah wouldn't do that."
She cares about me.
"Maybe." Ji-sung's voice was gentle but firm. "But she also worked at that club for a long time.
She knows people. She knows how dangerous I am.
Maybe she's trying to protect you in her own way. By scaring me? Fear can be protective. Or it can be controlling. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference." They talked for another hour, sitting on opposite ends of her small bed because there was nowhere else to sit. Ji-sung told her about his organization, about the territories he controlled and the enemies he had made. He told her about his younger sister, studying medicine in America, safe from his world. He told her about his father, who had built the organization from nothing and had died, leaving Ji-sung with debts and enemies and no choice but to become harder than both. I was supposed to be a doctor too, he said, staring at his hands as if seeing blood there. My father wanted that for both his children. But when he died, someone had to protect what was ours. My sister was only 15. She deserved to have her dreams. Someone had to sacrifice theirs.
And you chose to be that someone.
I didn't choose it. It chose me. He looked up at her, and the loneliness in his eyes was so raw it hurt to see. But I'm good at it. Violence, control, fear. Turns out I have a talent for the things that keep people in line. Tilda found herself reaching out, her hand covering his before she could think better of it. That doesn't mean it's all you are. Ji-sung stared at their joined hands like he had never seen such a thing before. When was the last time someone touched you like this? She asked quietly. Not afraid, not trying to seduce you. Just human contact. He didn't answer, but the way his fingers slowly curled around hers told her everything she needed to know. When he left that night, he stopped at her door and turned back. I meant what I said before. You're not like the others. You don't want something from me. You're not performing or trying to manage me. You just see me. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Maybe you just don't let people see you, Tilda said. Maybe. He smiled, a real smile this time, small and sad. Or maybe I've forgotten how to be seen. After he left, Tilda sat on her bed and looked at her phone. No new messages. No more warnings. She thought about what Ji-sung had said about Hannah, about fear and control and protection. She thought about the way he had looked at her, like she was water and he had been dying of thirst. She thought about calling him back, about crossing a line she knew she shouldn't cross. Instead, she lay down fully clothed on top of her blankets and stared at the ceiling until dawn, Ji-sung's card still clutched in her hand. Over the next 2 weeks, Ji-sung became a regular at Velvet Room. He always came with his men, always for business meetings, but his eyes always found Tilda in the crowd. Sometimes he would request her section. Sometimes he would just watch her work from across the room. And sometimes, when his meetings ended early, he would wait until her shift finished and drive her home through the neon-lit Seoul streets. They didn't talk much during those drives, but the silence between them felt comfortable now, like a conversation conducted in a language beyond words. He would pull up to her building, and she would hesitate before getting out, and something electric would hang in the air between them, possibility and danger wrapped together so tightly she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. The other girls at Velvet Room noticed. They whispered about Tilda and the handsome gangster who couldn't take his eyes off her. The manager noticed too, but she didn't say anything, probably because Ji-sung's presence meant safety, meant other customers wouldn't cause trouble, meant the protection racket that usually demanded payment left them alone. Hannah noticed. She called Tilda 3 times a day now, her voice tight with worry. Be careful, she would say. Men like him, they don't know how to love. They only know how to possess. Please, Tilda, end this before it destroys you. But Tilda couldn't end it. Didn't want to end it. Because for the first time in 3 years, she felt seen. Felt like she mattered to someone beyond what she could provide or perform. Ji-sung looked at her like she was precious, like she was choosing to be with him rather than enduring him, and that choice, that agency, meant everything to a woman who had spent 3 years surviving by surrendering pieces of herself. One Friday night, nearly a month after their first meeting, Ji-sung showed up at Velvet Room without his men. He sat at the bar where Tilda was working and ordered whiskey neat. The bar was slow that night, rain keeping most customers away, so Tilda leaned against the counter across from him. No business tonight? She asked. Tonight I'm here for personal reasons, he said, his dark eyes holding hers. Personal reasons at a hostess bar. That's a first. I came to see you. He said it simply, without pretense or game playing. I've been trying to stay away.
Trying to be smart about this.
But I can't.
Can't what? Can't stop thinking about you.
Can't stop wanting to hear your voice, see your smile. Can't stop imagining what it would be like if you were mine. Tilda's heart hammered against her ribs. I'm not anyone's. I don't belong to anyone.
I know.
That's what makes you perfect. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. I'm not asking you to belong to me, Tilda. I'm asking if I can belong to you. The bar felt too small suddenly, too hot, the air too thick to breathe.
You don't mean that.
Men like you don't belong to anyone either. Men like me don't usually meet women like you. He reached across the bar and took her hand, right there in front of anyone who cared to look. I know what I am. I know what I do. But when I'm with you, I remember who I wanted to be. And I want more of that. More of you. This is insane, Tilda whispered, but she didn't pull her hand away. You're a criminal. I'm an illegal immigrant sex worker. We don't get a happy ending. Maybe not. But we could have right now. He stood, pulling cash from his wallet and dropping it on the bar.
Come with me.
Not as a transaction. Not as an arrangement. Just as two people who want to be together. Say yes, Tilda. She looked at his hand, still holding hers. She looked at his face, at the hope and fear written there in equal measure. She thought about Hannah's warnings, about the anonymous messages that had stopped after Ji-sung came to her apartment. She thought about every cautious, careful choice she had made in the last 3 years, every time she had chosen survival over living.
Yes, she said.
They went to his penthouse in Gangnam, a space so different from her studio apartment it felt like entering another dimension. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering city. The furniture was all clean lines and expensive materials. Art that Tilda suspected was worth more than she would earn in her lifetime hung on the walls. It was beautiful and cold, a showroom rather than a home. You don't really live here, do you? She said, walking slowly through the space. This is where you bring people you need to impress. But it's not yours. Ji-sung smiled, surprised. How did you know? Because there's nothing personal here. No photos, no books, no mess. It's like a hotel. He nodded slowly. I have another place. Smaller. That's where I actually live. But I thought you should see this first. Know the full picture of who I am. Show me your real place, Tilda said. I don't care about impressing. I care about real. So, he took her to an apartment in Itaewon, just 3 blocks from where she lived. It was still nicer than her place, but it was human here. Books in Korean and English were scattered on surfaces. His sister's graduation photo sat on a shelf. The kitchen showed signs of actual use. And on the coffee table, half covered by a newspaper, was one of Tilda's hair ties, left behind on one of those late-night drives when he had given her his car charger. You kept that? She asked, picking it up. I keep everything that reminds me you're real. He moved behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. That this isn't just something I'm imagining. Tilda turned to face him, the hair tie still clutched in her hand. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared of what wanting you means. Of what it will cost. It will cost, he said honestly. Being with me, it puts a target on your back. My enemies will see you as leverage. My allies will see you as weakness. Your own safety becomes negotiable the moment people know you matter to me. Then why are you asking me to say yes? Because I'm selfish. Because I've spent 7 years choosing duty over desire, and I'm tired. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to want something for myself. He cupped her face in his hands. But if you want to walk away, do it now. Before this goes further. Before I can't let you go. And if I don't want to walk away, then I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of that choice. She kissed him then, rising on her toes to press her lips to his, and he responded with a hunger that had been building for weeks. They stumbled toward his bedroom, shedding clothes and caution with equal abandon, and when they fell into his bed together, it felt like falling and flying at the same time. Afterward, lying tangled in his sheets with the Seoul skyline glowing beyond his windows, Tilda traced the scars on his chest. Bullet wounds, knife marks, the roadmap of violence written on his skin. Each one has a story, she said softly. Most of them aren't good stories.
Tell me anyway.
So he did. He told her about the war with the Busan Syndicate that had left him with the scar on his ribs. About the betrayal from his father's oldest friend that had nearly killed him and left the mark on his shoulder. About the raid that had gone wrong, about the deals that had turned bloody, about every moment of violence that had shaped him into what he was. And when he finished, Tilda told him her stories too. About leaving Ghana, with dreams of education and opportunity. About the visa that expired while she was trying to save enough money to renew it. About the descent from legitimate work to less legitimate to finally here, to pouring drinks and smiling for men who saw her as exotic entertainment. About sending money home, and lying to her mother about where it came from. "We're both surviving," she said finally, her head on his chest. "Just doing whatever it takes to get through the next day. Maybe we could survive together," Ji-sung said, his fingers trailing through her hair. "Maybe that's enough." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. Two broken people trying to make something whole. Outside, Seoul never slept, its lights burning like stars that had fallen to earth. Inside, for just a few hours, they let themselves believe in possibilities that the daylight might steal away. The next morning, Tilda woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Ji-sung speaking rapid Korean on the phone. His voice was different when he spoke his own language, harder and more commanding. She lay in bed listening to him conduct business, arranging shipments and meetings and things she probably didn't want to know about. When he hung up and saw her awake, his expression softened. "I have to go to Busan today," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Business. I'll be back tomorrow night."
Okay.
She sat up, pulling the sheet around her. "We're really doing this? This isn't just one night? Do you want it to be just one night?"
No.
"Then we're really doing this." He leaned over and kissed her forehead. "Stay here today if you want. Or go home. Whatever makes you comfortable. I'll call you tonight." After he left, Tilda wandered around his apartment, still wrapped in his sheet, drinking his coffee from his cups, feeling like an intruder in his life. She found his bookshelf and ran her fingers over the spines. Korean novels, English business books, medical textbooks from his aborted dreams of being a doctor. She found his closet, full of expensive suits and casual clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She found a locked drawer in his desk and wondered what secrets he kept even from her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Hannah. "Haven't heard from you. Are you okay?" Tilda typed back. "I'm fine. Just been busy." The response came immediately. "Busy with Ji-sung?" Tilda hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Yes." The reads appeared and disappeared several times before Hannah's next message arrived. "Please be careful. I care about you." "I know. I care about you too." But something about the exchange felt off. Tilda couldn't quite identify what, just a feeling in her gut that something was wrong. She remembered Ji-sung's suggestion that Hannah might have sent those anonymous warnings. At the time, she had dismissed it. But now, looking at those messages, she wondered. She went home that afternoon, back to her tiny studio that felt even smaller after Ji-sung's apartment. But it was hers, paid for with her own money, free from anyone's control. She spent the rest of the day sewing, working on a dress she was making from fabric she had found in a market. Creating something beautiful was her form of therapy, her way of proving to herself that she was more than what she did to survive. Ji-sung called that night as promised, his voice tired but warm.
"Tell me about your day," he said.
So she did. She told him about the dress she was making, about the Korean drama she had watched, about the ajumma next door who had brought her kimchi. Normal, everyday things that felt precious precisely because they were normal. "I like hearing about your life," he said. "It reminds me there's a world outside of mine." "You could have that world," Tilda said. "You could leave this life. Start over." "With what?" "Everything I have is built on what I've done. I can't just walk away." "Why not?" "Because they won't let me. The people above me, the people below me, the enemies waiting for any sign of weakness. Men like me don't get to retire. We die or we get killed. There's no third option." "Then make one," Tilda insisted. "You're the boss. You have power. Use it to free yourself instead of imprisoning yourself." He was quiet for a long moment. "You make it sound simple. Maybe it is. Maybe we just make it complicated because we're scared." She heard him exhale, long and slow. "I'll think about it. That's the best I can promise. That's enough.
For now."
They talked until she fell asleep, his voice in her ear like a lullaby, and when she woke in the morning, she felt more hopeful than she had in years. Maybe they could make this work. Maybe love was enough to redeem them both. Maybe she wasn't crazy for believing in him. She should have known better than to believe in maybes. 2 months passed in a blur of stolen moments and careful navigation. Ji-sung was busy with his organization, often gone for days at a time on business he wouldn't discuss. But when he was in Seoul, he was hers. They fell into a rhythm, meeting at his apartment or taking late-night drives through the city. He brought her gifts, small things mostly, fabric from expensive stores, books in English, once a single perfect rose that had cost more than seemed possible. Tilda continued working at Velvet Room, though she no longer needed the money the way she had before. Ji-sung wanted her to quit, to let him take care of everything, but she refused. She had learned the hard way that depending on anyone, even someone who loved her, was dangerous. She needed her own income, her own independence, her own way out if things went wrong. And things would go wrong. She knew that. She could feel it in the way Hannah's calls had become less frequent, in the way other girls at the bar watched her with something between envy and pity, in the way Ji-sung sometimes looked at her like he was memorizing her face in case he lost her. The photographs arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under her apartment door in a plain manila envelope. Tilda almost threw it away without opening it, thinking it was junk mail. But something made her look inside. Her hands started shaking immediately. The first photo showed Ji-sung in his office with a woman. The woman was Korean, beautiful, her hand on his arm in a gesture that looked intimate. The second showed them at a restaurant, seated close together, his head tilted toward hers like they were sharing secrets. The third was taken at night, showing the woman leaving what Tilda recognized as Ji-sung's office building, her coat pulled tight against the cold. But it was the fourth photo that made Tilda's stomach drop, because she recognized the woman now. It was Hannah, her friend, her protector, her surrogate mother in this foreign country. Hannah, with Ji-sung, looking at him the way Tilda looked at him, like he was everything. There was a note paper-clipped to the photos, typed in English. Ask him about Hannah. Then ask him if he knew you worked for his enemy. The second part didn't make sense until Tilda found the other document in the envelope. It was a client list from her old salon, highlighting the nights she had worked. And there, circled in red pen, were the names of men she had served drinks to, had smiled for, had tolerated. Names she didn't recognize then, but had learned since. Prosecutor Kong, Ji-sung's biggest enemy, the man who had been trying to bring down his organization for 3 years. Tilda had poured drinks for him at least 5 times, maybe more. She hadn't known who he was then, hadn't cared beyond getting her tip and going home. But someone knew. Someone had kept records. And someone wanted her to know that her past was connected to Ji-sung's present in ways that would never be forgiven. Tilda sat on her floor, the photos spread around her like evidence at a crime scene, and tried to understand. The photos of Hannah and Ji-sung looked recent, taken within the last few weeks based on the clothes and the season visible through windows. But Ji-sung had said he hadn't seen Hannah in 5 years. One of them was lying. Maybe both. And the connection to Prosecutor Kong. If Ji-sung knew she had served his enemy, had he been using her all along? Getting information, keeping track of his enemy's movements through her? The timeline worked out. She had quit the Gangnam salon around the same time Ji-sung started showing interest in her. What if none of it had been real? What if she had been a pawn in a game she didn't even know was being played? She called him. The phone rang 6 times before he answered, his voice distracted. I'm in a meeting. Can I call you back? Who is Hannah to you? The words came out harsh, sharp-edged with betrayal. A pause. What? Hannah. The woman who took care of me at the salon. The woman in these photos I just received, sitting in your office, having dinner with you, leaving your building late at night. Who is she, Ji-sung? Tilda, I don't know what photos you're talking about, but... Don't lie to me. She was surprised by the steel in her own voice. Just tell me the truth. Were you seeing her while you were with me? No. His voice was firm, certain. I told you before, I haven't seen Hannah in 5 years. Not since she worked for me. Worked for you? Tilda's mind spun, trying to fit pieces together that kept changing shape. What do you mean worked for you? She was my secretary. Years ago, before I fully took over the organization. We were involved briefly, but it ended when my father died. When I had to become this. She wanted more than I could give. I let her go, Because she deserved better. You let her go. Like she was yours to let go. Like she didn't get a choice. She did have a choice. But she was in love with me, and I couldn't love her back. Not the way she needed. So yes, I let her go. I haven't spoken to her since. Then explain these photos. They're recent, Ji-sung. She's wearing a winter coat. The trees outside your office are bare. Send them to me.
Right now.
Tilda took pictures of the photos with her phone and sent them. She heard him typing on his end, probably forwarding them to his tech people. The silence stretched for a full minute before he spoke again. These are doctored. Look at the metadata, the shadows, the angles. Someone photoshopped these. The restaurant photo is from 2019, I can tell by the suit I'm wearing. The office photo might be real but old, from when she worked for me. This is a setup, Tilda. And the client list? Her voice broke on the words. Did you know I served Prosecutor Kong? Did you know before you approached me? Another pause, this one longer and more damning. I found out later. After we were already together. My men ran a background check. And it came up. You ran a background check on me? I run background checks on everyone close to me. It's not personal, it's survival. It feels pretty fucking personal. Tilda was crying now, hot, angry tears that blurred her vision. You knew I had connected to your enemy, and you didn't tell me. You let me think this was real when you were probably just using me for information. I wasn't using you. I swear to you, I wasn't. By the time I found out, I was already in love with you. And Kong, he has hundreds of girls pour his drinks over the years. You were nothing to him, just another face. It didn't matter. It matters to me. It matters that you kept secrets. That you let me believe this was simple when it was never simple. Tilda, please. Let me explain in person. These photos, they're designed to make you doubt me. Someone wants us apart. Let me come over, and we'll figure this out together. But Tilda was already shaking her head, even though he couldn't see her. I need space. I need to think. Don't do this. Don't let someone else's manipulation destroy what we have. What we have. She laughed bitterly. I don't even know what we have anymore. Maybe it was never real. Maybe I was just another transaction, another piece on your board. You know that's not true. You know what you mean to me. Do I? Because right now I don't know anything except that you've been lying to me. About Hannah, about the background check, probably about 100 other things I haven't discovered yet. Tilda, don't. Just don't. She hung up before he could say anything else, before his voice could crack her resolve. She sat in the middle of her floor, surrounded by photographs that may or may not have been real, and let herself break apart. Her phone rang immediately. Ji-sung calling back. She declined it. He called again. And again. Text messages started flooding in. Please talk to me. I don't know what happened. Let me explain. Please, Tilda. Don't do this. She turned off her phone and sat in the silence of her apartment, trying to piece together truth from lies, love from manipulation, her own feelings from the stories she'd been told. The photos stared up at her from the floor. Hannah's face looked happy in them, radiant even, the way Tilda probably looked when she was with Ji-sung. Had Hannah loved him?
Did she still?
Was any of her friendship with Tilda real? Or had it all been about staying close to the man who had let her go? There was only one way to find out. Tilda powered her phone back on, ignoring the 17 new messages from Ji-sung, and called Hannah. Hannah answered on the third ring, her voice warm and concerned. Tilda, I've been worried. You haven't called in days. Are you okay? I need to see you. Tilda kept her voice neutral. Can you come over? Of course. Right now?
Right now.
Hannah arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a bag of street food and wearing the expression of a concerned friend. She took one look at Tilda's tear-stained face and immediately pulled her into a hug. Oh, honey, what happened? Is it Ji-sung? Did he hurt you? Tilda stepped back from the embrace and gestured to the photos still spread across her floor. Hannah's face went pale. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. For just a moment, her mask slipped and Tilda saw raw emotion underneath.
Pain.
Humiliation.
Rage.
Then Hannah's expression smoothed out and tears filled her eyes right on cue. Oh my God, she whispered, pressing a hand to her mouth. Tilda, it's not what you think. Then what is it? Hannah sank onto the edge of Tilda's bed, her hands trembling. He called me, she said, her voice barely audible. About a month ago.
Said he wanted to talk about you.
I thought he was going to ask for help, maybe advice on how to make things work. So I met him. The photos show more than one meeting. Because the first time he said he needed my help protecting you. Said there were threats against you from his enemies and he wanted my advice on how to keep you safe without scaring you. Hannah's tears were falling freely now. I thought I was helping. I thought I was being a good friend. And the touching? The way you're looking at him? Hannah's face crumpled. I won't lie. I have history with him. I was in love with him once years ago. And seeing him again, seeing him in love with someone else, with you, it hurt. But I swear I didn't act on it. The next photo, Tilda said coldly, feeling nothing but numbness now. The one where he's leaning close to you. Hannah stopped, looked down at her hands. He was telling me he loved you, describing how you made him feel. And I got emotional. I leaned in and he pulled back, told me firmly that there was nothing between us, could never be anything. I left right after. I was humiliated. The story was smooth, practiced, delivered with just the right amount of tears and shame. And maybe it was true. Maybe Hannah was exactly what she seemed, a woman nursing old wounds who had made the mistake of hoping for something that couldn't happen. Or maybe she was a brilliant actress, playing a role she had been rehearsing for months. I'm so sorry, Hannah continued, reaching for Tilda's hand. I should have told you I was meeting with him. But I didn't want to worry you, and I thought I could handle my own feelings. I was wrong. This is all my fault. Did you send these photos? Hannah's eyes widened, apparently shocked.
No. God, no.
Someone must have been following us, watching. Probably someone who wants to drive a wedge between you and Ji-sung. Or someone who wants me to know the truth about what's been happening behind my back. Tilda, please. You have to believe me. I would never hurt you. You're like a daughter to me. But something in her voice rang false, a note just slightly off-key. Or maybe Tilda was just so paranoid now that she couldn't trust anyone or anything. She pulled her hand away from Hannah's grip. I need you to leave. I need to think. Of course. Hannah stood, gathering her things. But please call me when you're ready to talk. I'm here for you. Always. After she left, Tilda sat alone with the photographs and her doubts. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Didn't know who to trust. The only thing she knew for certain was that her world had tilted on its axis and she couldn't find her footing. She spent the rest of the day and most of the night turning everything over in her mind. The timeline of events, the way Hannah had always been just a little too protective, the anonymous messages that had stopped after Ji-sung came to her apartment. The way he had known immediately that the photos were doctored. His insistence that someone wanted them apart. By dawn, she had made a decision. Maybe it was the right one. Maybe it would destroy her. But staying in this limbo of doubt and fear would destroy her just as surely. She powered on her phone and typed out a message to Ji-sung. It's over.
Don't contact me again.
I can't do this. His response came within seconds. Please. Just let me see you. Let me prove that someone's manipulating us. But Tilda had already blocked his number, her hands shaking as she did it. Then she blocked him on every platform, every possible way he could reach her, building a wall between them out of fear and fury and heartbreak. Then she lay down on her bed, still fully dressed, and let herself fall apart completely. Because whether the photos were real or fake, whether Hannah was friend or enemy, whether Ji-sung had used her or loved her, the truth remained the same. She had been foolish enough to believe that someone like her could have a happy ending with someone like him. And that belief had cost her everything. Across Seoul, in his office with the door locked and his men waiting outside, Ji-sung stared at the message that had just destroyed his world. He read it over and over, as if the words might change meaning, might soften their blow. They didn't. He pulled up the photos she had sent him and studied them with a cold analytical focus that had kept him alive in a dangerous world. Someone had done this. Someone had taken old photos, maybe some new surveillance shots, and created a narrative designed to separate him from Tilda. Someone who knew about Hannah, who knew about their history, who had access to both his movements and Tilda's. His tech expert knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "The photos are definitely manipulated," the young man said, pulling up image files on a tablet. "See here, the shadows don't match the timestamps. And this one, the background is from his old office location, before the renovation last year. Whoever made these was skilled, but not perfect. Find out who sent them to Tilda. I don't care what it costs. Already working on it." The package was dropped off by a courier service, but the request came from a burner phone. "We're tracing that now." After the tech left, Ji-sung sat in silence, his mind working through possibilities. The list of people who knew about Hannah was short. His inner circle, Hannah herself, maybe a few others from years ago. The list of people who would want to destroy his relationship with Tilda was longer but more abstract. Rivals who might see her as a weakness. Allies who thought he was distracted. Internal challengers who wanted his position and saw his happiness as exploitable vulnerability. Or it could be simpler. It could be someone motivated not by strategy but by emotion. Someone who wanted Tilda to hurt. Or wanted Ji-sung to hurt. Or wanted them both to suffer. He thought about the anonymous messages Tilda had received, the ones warning her away from him. He thought about Hannah's convenient friendship with Tilda, how she had been there from the beginning, protecting and guiding. He thought about the fact that Hannah was one of the few people who knew both his schedule and Tilda's routines. His phone rang. One of his lieutenants, voice urgent. "Boss, we have a problem. The Busan Syndicate just hit one of our shipments. They're claiming it as retaliation for something we didn't do. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Ji-sung stood, compartmentalizing his personal crisis with practiced ease. He had learned long ago how to separate his heart from his head, how to function even when everything inside him was screaming. It was what made him good at what he did. It was also what made him alone. But not anymore. Or at least not until this morning. For 2 months, he had let himself believe in the possibility of more. Of better. Of a life that included softness alongside the hardness his world demanded. And now that possibility had been ripped away by photos that might be lies and truths that might be manipulations, and he was back where he started. Alone in his office, surrounded by men who respected him and feared him but could never know him. He thought about calling Tilda anyway, showing up at her door, refusing to let her push him away. But he knew her well enough to know that forcing the issue would only drive her further away. She needed space to think, to process. He just had to hope that when she finished thinking, she would come back to him. And if she didn't, then he would spend the rest of his life wondering what might have been if someone hadn't poisoned the best thing that had ever happened to him. 3 days passed. Ji-sung handled the crisis with Busan, negotiated new terms with a weapons supplier, broke up a potential mutiny in his southern territory. He moved through his days like a machine, efficient and cold, while a part of him counted every hour that Tilda stayed silent. His men noticed but said nothing. They had never seen their boss like this before, had never seen him affected by a woman or anyone else. It made them nervous, this crack in his armor. Made them wonder if he was still fit to lead. On the 4th day, his tech expert came back with a name. The burner phone that ordered the courier was purchased with cash, but we tracked it through cell tower data. It pinged most frequently near 2 locations, Gangnam and Itaewon. Near the old salon and near Tilda's apartment.
Hannah.
The name settled in his chest like a stone. He should have seen it sooner. Should have recognized the pattern of someone obsessed, someone who had never let go. But he had dismissed her years ago, had filed her away as resolved, had never imagined she would turn her pain into this. "Bring her to me," he said quietly, not roughly, not like a prisoner, but bring her. For Tilda, those 3 days passed in a haze of work and grief. She went through the motions at Velvet Room, smiling and pouring drinks and pretending her heart wasn't a shattered thing in her chest. The other girls asked what was wrong. She told them she was tired. They didn't believe her, but they didn't push. Hannah called twice a day, her voice full of concern. "Are you okay? Have you eaten? Do you want me to come over?" Tilda deflected each time, made excuses, kept her at arm's length. Because if Ji-sung was telling the truth about the photos being manipulated, then Hannah was the most likely suspect. And if Hannah had done this, then everything about their friendship had been a lie from the beginning. On the fourth night, Tilda's manager pulled her aside at the end of her shift. "There's a man here to see you," she said, her expression worried. "Says he's a friend. He's been waiting for an hour." Tilda's heart leaped into her throat. Ji-sung. It had to be. He had come anyway, had refused to let her push him away. She didn't know whether to be angry or relieved or both. But when she walked out to the bar's small waiting area, it wasn't Ji-sung sitting there. It was one of his lieutenants, the hard-faced man with the scar on his jaw. He stood when he saw her, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Tilda," he said in accented English. "Boss sent me. He needs you to come with me. I'm not going anywhere with you. It's not a request." The man's voice was firm, but not unkind. "Boss found out who sent the photos. He wants you there when he confronts them. Said you deserve to know the truth." "Who?" The word came out as a whisper.
Hannah.
The world tilted. Tilda grabbed the back of a chair for support, her mind racing. So Ji-sung had been right. The photos had been manipulated. Hannah had betrayed her. The only real friend she thought she had in this entire country had orchestrated this whole nightmare. "Take me to him," she said. They drove through Seoul in silence, the lieutenant navigating the late-night traffic with efficient precision. Tilda stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, trying to understand how she had been so blind. All of Hannah's warnings, her protectiveness, her seemingly maternal concern. It had all been about keeping Tilda away from Ji-sung. Or about positioning herself as the alternative if that failed. How long had she been planning this? Since the beginning? Since before Tilda even met Ji-sung? They pulled up to a warehouse in an industrial district, the kind of place that looked abandoned but probably wasn't. The lieutenant led her inside, through corridors that smelled of oil and dust, until they reached a door guarded by 2 more men. They nodded and opened it without a word. Inside was an office, surprisingly well-appointed given the building's exterior. And in that office stood Ji-sung, his back to the door, shoulders tense. When he heard them enter, he turned, and the look on his face when he saw Tilda nearly broke her all over again. Relief and love and pain all mixed together. Hannah sat in a chair on the other side of the desk, her hands folded in her lap, her expression oddly calm. When she saw Tilda, she smiled slightly. "Hello, honey. You did this?" Tilda's voice shook. "You sent the photos? The messages?" Hannah tilted her head, considering. "Yes and no. I sent the messages early on, trying to warn you away. The photos came later, when I realized you weren't going to listen to warnings."
"Why?"
Hannah's calm cracked, and suddenly all the emotion she had been hiding flooded to the surface.
"Why?"
"Because he was mine first. Because I loved him when he had nothing, when he was just a boy drowning in his father's debts. I stood by him. I helped him build his empire. And he threw me away like I was nothing. I didn't throw you away." Ji-sung's voice was hard, controlled. "I let you go, because you deserved better than this life." "Better?" Hannah laughed bitterly. "You mean you stopped loving me? If you ever even loved me at all. I cared about you, but not the way you needed. Not the way you deserved. And staying with you would have been cruel. So instead you waited 5 years, and then fell in love with her?" Hannah's eyes turned to Tilda, and there was so much hatred there that Tilda flinched. What does she have that I don't? What makes her so special? "She doesn't want anything from me," Ji-sung said quietly. "She sees me. Not what I can do for her. Not what I represent. Just me. That's all. That's everything." Hannah's face twisted with pain and rage. "I see you. I've always seen you. You see who you want me to be. You see the power and the control and the empire." She sees the parts I've been trying to kill for 7 years. The parts that want peace. That want normal. That want love without conditions. "So you destroyed us for that?" Tilda found her voice, stepping closer. "You pretended to be my friend, to care about me, all so you could tear us apart?" "I did care about you," Hannah said, and for a moment she sounded sincere. "You were sweet.
Kind.
You reminded me of who I used to be before all this. But then he looked at you, and I saw that look, and I knew. I knew he felt for you what he never felt for me. And I couldn't just watch that happen. So you lied. You manipulated. You created evidence and doctored photos and played us both. I gave you warnings. Hannah's voice rose, desperate. I tried to save you from this. From him. From the life that would swallow you whole. But you wouldn't listen. You thought love would protect you. You thought you were different, special, the one who could change him. But I didn't need changing, Ji-sung said. At least not the way you always thought. I needed someone to remind me why I was doing this. What I was protecting. She did that. You just wanted me to need you. I do need you.
No.
You need the idea of me. The fantasy. The power I represent.
Tilda needs me.
The man underneath all this. That's the difference. Hannah stared at them both, and something in her face shattered. I've lost, she whispered. Haven't I? Even now, with everything I did, you still choose her. Every time, Ji-sung said. Every version of this story. Every choice. Every moment. I choose her. Tilda felt tears on her cheeks and realized she was crying. Not from sadness now, but from relief and grief mixed together. Relief that he was real, that they were real. Grief for Hannah, who had loved poorly and lost everything because of it. What happens now? Tilda asked, looking at Ji-sung. What do we do with her? Hannah laughed, sharp and bitter. Oh, he'll kill me. That's what happens to people who cross him, who betray him. That's what you have to look forward to, Tilda. One day you'll make him angry enough, and this will be you sitting here. No, Ji-sung said, and his voice was tired. Because despite what you think, I'm not a monster. You're going to leave Seoul. Tonight. I have a ticket for you to Jeju Island. There's a job there, a small hotel that needs management. It's legitimate, clean, far from this world. You'll take it, and you'll never contact me or Tilda again. Hannah blinked, clearly surprised. You're letting me go? I'm giving you what I tried to give you 5 years ago. A chance at a better life. Don't waste it this time. And if I refuse, then you face criminal charges for stalking and harassment. Then I let the police handle it. Then your life gets much harder than it needs to be. Hannah looked at him for a long moment, then at Tilda. I really did care about you, she said softly. That part wasn't a lie. I know, Tilda said, and found that it was true. She could see the broken woman underneath the manipulations, the lonely person who had made terrible choices out of desperate love. It doesn't make what you did okay. But I understand it. Will you forgive me?
Someday.
Maybe. But not today. Hannah nodded, accepting this. Ji-sung's men escorted her out, and then it was just the two of them in that warehouse office, separated by 10 feet and 4 days of hurt and confusion. I'm sorry, they both said at the same time, and despite everything, Tilda laughed. I'm sorry I didn't trust you, she continued. I'm sorry I believed the photos, believed the lies. I should have known better. Ji-sung closed the distance between them, stopping just close enough that she could feel his warmth. I'm sorry I ran a background check without telling you. I'm sorry for the secrets, for the danger I brought into your life. For all of it. What do we do now? He took her hands in his thumbs rubbing gentle circles on her wrists. We start over. No more secrets. No more half-truths. I tell you everything about my world, and you decide if you can live with it. And if I can't, then I find a way to leave it. For you. His voice was absolute, certain. I meant what I said to Hannah. I choose you. Every time. Whatever that requires. Leaving your organization isn't that simple. Maybe not. But I've been thinking about what you said about making a third option. About using my power to free myself instead of imprisoning myself with it. He smiled slightly. You make me want impossible things. Like what? Like a life where I wake up beside you every morning. Where I don't have to worry about you being used against me. Where we can just be two people in love without all this weight on top of us. Tilda reached up and touched his face, feeling the tension in his jaw, the exhaustion around his eyes. We can have that, she said. We just have to be brave enough to take it. They left the warehouse together, hand in hand, and drove to his apartment in Itaewon. They didn't talk much, just sat close in the car, their fingers intertwined, relearning the shape of each other. Inside his apartment, they stood in the kitchen and held each other while the city hummed beyond the windows. "I was dying without you," Ji-sung whispered into her hair. "These 4 days, I felt like I couldn't breathe." "I know. Me too." They made love slowly that night, reaffirming every touch, every whisper, every promise. And afterward, lying tangled together in the pre-dawn darkness, Ji-sung told her everything. About the organization structure, about the violence he had committed, about the enemies who circled like sharks waiting for blood, about the money he had been quietly moving into legitimate businesses, preparing for a day he might need to walk away. About his sister in America, who didn't know half of what he did to keep her safe and educated. And Tilda told him everything too. About the shame she carried for what she did to survive. About the mother back home who thought she was teaching English and making good money. About the nights she cried herself to sleep feeling worthless and used. About the dreams she had abandoned and the ones she still carried secretly in her heart. By the time the sun rose, they knew each other's darkness and had decided to love each other anyway. But knowing the truth and living with its consequences were different things, and Seoul's underworld didn't forgive weakness or hesitation. The attack came 3 weeks later, quick and brutal and designed to send a message. Tilda was leaving Velvet Room after her shift when she was grabbed from behind, a hand over her mouth, an arm around her waist. She struggled, her self-defense training from 3 years of surviving in dangerous places kicking in, but there were 2 of them and they were strong and determined. They dragged her toward a van idling in the alley, and Tilda knew with absolute certainty that if they got her into that van, she was dead. She bit down hard on the fingers covering her mouth, tasting blood. The man cursed in Korean, and his grip loosened just enough for her to scream. The sound cut through the night like a siren. Immediately, 3 of Ji-sung's men appeared from their watching positions nearby. Ji-sung had insisted on protection detail after the incident with Hannah, and now Tilda was grateful for it even as she hated needing it. His men moved fast, efficient, trained. The kidnappers released her and ran for their van, and Tilda collapsed against the alley wall, shaking and gasping. One of Ji-sung's guards called him immediately while the others gave chase. Within 10 minutes, Ji-sung arrived, his face white with fury and fear. He pulled Tilda into his arms without a word, just held her while she trembled against him. "Who?" she asked when she could speak. "Busan Syndicate. They want to draw me into a war. Using you as bait. They'll try again."
"I know."
Ji-sung pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face.
"This is what I meant about the cost.
This is what being with me means. You'll always be a target. Always be looking over your shoulder. Then we end it," Tilda said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "You said you were moving money into legitimate businesses. How much do you need to walk away completely?" "It's not about money. It's about permission. The people above me, the alliances I've built, they won't let me just leave." "What if you didn't ask permission?" "That's called betrayal."
"They kill you for that."
"What if you gave them something they wanted more? What if you turned over your territories, your operations, everything, but kept the legitimate businesses for yourself?" "A clean break." Ji-sung stared at her like she had suggested flying to the moon. "They would see it as weakness. Or they'd see it as you being smart enough to get out while you can. You've made them rich for 7 years. You've expanded their operations. They owe you a retirement. The underworld doesn't work like that."
"Then make it work like that."
"You're the boss, Ji-sung. You have power. Use it to negotiate your freedom, not just to perpetuate your prison." He kissed her then, hard and desperate. "You're either the smartest person I know or the most naive. Maybe both. But I'm also right." The next 3 months were the most dangerous of their relationship. Ji-sung began carefully, quietly, negotiating with the heads of other organizations, with the shadow figures above him who controlled the real power. He offered them his territories in exchange for safe passage out. He gave them introductions to his contacts, his supply chains, his networks. He stripped himself of everything that had made him powerful in that world, keeping only the legitimate businesses he had been building in secret.
Some of them laughed at him, called him weak, pussy-whipped, finished. Others saw the writing on the wall, saw that the government crackdowns were getting more serious, that the old ways of operating were becoming untenable. A few even envied him, wished they could walk away too. There was pushback, of course. Threats and posturing, and one serious attempt on his life that left him with a bullet wound in his shoulder that Tilda had to help clean and bandage in his apartment because going to a hospital would have raised questions. She had cried while disinfecting the wound, her hands shaking, and he had smiled at her despite the pain. "You're tougher than you think," he had said. "I don't want to be tough. I want you to be safe. Soon." Tilda quit her job at Velvet Room during this time. She couldn't handle the fear anymore, couldn't function wondering if every customer was a threat, if every shadow hid an enemy. Instead, she spent her days in Ji-sung's apartment, working on her sewing, designing clothes she hoped to someday sell if they survived this transition. Creating beauty was her way of maintaining sanity in the chaos. And then, on a cold night in late autumn, Ji-sung came home and simply said, "It's done." Tilda looked up from the dress she was hemming, needle frozen mid-stitch. "What's done?" "All of it. I'm out. Officially, completely out. As of tonight, I have no territories, no operations, no ties to the organization beyond courtesy and history." He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. "We're free." She wanted to believe him, but she had learned that freedom in their world was never simple. "Are you sure? They won't change their minds? Won't come after you later?" "I gave them everything they wanted, and then some. And I made it clear that I have insurance, information that goes public if anything happens to me or you. It's not perfect protection, but it's enough." He lifted her chin so their eyes met. "We can leave Seoul. Start over somewhere new. Busan, maybe by the ocean.
Somewhere the past can't follow us as easily. What about your sister? She's graduating this year. She'll come visit, meet you properly. But she doesn't need me hovering over her anymore. She's strong.
She survived.
Because you made yourself into a monster to protect her. And now I get to be human again. Because you protected me right back." They held each other in his Itaewon apartment while the city lights glittered beyond the windows, and for the first time in months, Tilda let herself believe in the future. A future where they weren't looking over their shoulders every moment. Where love didn't require bodyguards and contingency plans. Where they could just be. 2 days later, everything fell apart. Tilda was at Ji-sung's apartment, waiting for him to return from what was supposed to be a final meeting with his old lieutenants, a goodbye dinner where he would formally pass the torch. Her phone buzzed with a news alert: shooting in Gangnam Business District. Multiple casualties. Her blood went cold. That was where Ji-sung's meeting was happening. She tried calling him. No answer. Tried his lieutenants. No answer. She paced the apartment, her heart hammering, her mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. An hour later, her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered with shaking hands.
"Tilda?"
It was one of Ji-sung's guards, his voice tight with urgency. "Boss is hurt. Not critical, but he needs you. I'm sending a car." What happened? Old enemies. They didn't like him leaving, thought it made them look weak by association. They hit the restaurant. "But he's alive. You need to come now." The car took her to a private clinic in an unmarked building, the kind of place that treated injuries without asking questions or filing police reports. Ji-sung was sitting up on an examination table, his shirt off, his chest wrapped in bandages. His face was pale, but his eyes cleared when he saw her. "I'm okay," he said immediately. "It looks worse than it is. You were shot." Tilda's voice was high and thin with panic.
"They shot you."
"Grazed me. Through and through, didn't hit anything vital. The doctors already patched me up." But Tilda couldn't stop shaking. She thought about losing him, about the world without him in it, and something inside her snapped. "This has to stop," she said, tears streaming down her face. "We can't keep living like this. We can't keep surviving attacks and close calls and waiting for the next person to decide you deserve to die."
"I know."
Ji-sung tried to stand but winced and settled back. "That's why I'm done. Completely done. Tonight was supposed to be goodbye, and it was.
They made their statement. I survived. And now I'm gone. They'll try again. Maybe. But every day that passes, I become less relevant to their world. Less of a threat, less of a target. We just have to outlast their anger. But Tilda was thinking about something else, something she had been turning over in her mind for weeks. What if we didn't just outlast it? What if we disappeared completely? Ji-sung looked at her, understanding dawning. You mean leave Korea? I mean start over. Different country, different names, different everything. Your legitimate businesses can be sold or managed remotely. My family thinks I'm already successful here, so I can tell them I'm expanding to a new market. We just go. And your mother? Your siblings? I video call them. I visit once a year. But I stop lying about what I do. I tell them the truth, or at least enough of it. And I live my actual life instead of this half-life in the shadows. Where would we go? Anywhere. Canada, Australia, somewhere far from all of this. We learn a new language, blend into a new place, build something real. Ji-sung stared at her for a long moment, and she saw him working through the logistics, the possibilities, the risks. Then he smiled, that rare genuine smile she had only seen a handful of times. Okay. Okay? Okay. Let's disappear. Let's be ghosts. Let's have the life we deserve instead of the one we've been stuck in. Tilda laughed through her tears and carefully, mindful of his injuries, climbed onto the examination table to hold him. They stayed like that, wrapped around each other in a clinic that smelled of antiseptic and secrets, and planned their escape. But Seoul's underworld had one more move to make, one more attempt to destroy what they were building. And it came from a direction neither of them expected. The woman who showed up at Tilda's apartment 3 days later was young, maybe 23, with desperate eyes and a pregnant belly. She stood in the hallway, shifting her weight from foot to foot, clearly terrified. Are you Tilda? She asked in heavily accented English. Yes. Who are you? My name is Minji. I need to talk to you about Ji-sung. Tilda's instinct was to slam the door, to refuse to let anyone else complicate their lives when they were so close to getting out. But something about the girl's fear, about the way she clutched her stomach protectively, made Tilda pause. Come in. Minji sat on the edge of Tilda's bed and told a story that should have destroyed everything. She claimed she had been with Ji-sung 6 months ago, a brief encounter when he was drunk and grieving after a particularly brutal business deal. She claimed the baby was his. She claimed he had abandoned her when she told him about the pregnancy, had threatened her into silence. But even as she told the story, her eyes kept darting to the door, her hands trembling in a way that suggested she wasn't here by choice. And when Tilda looked closely, she saw bruises on Minji's wrists, the kind that came from being held down. Who sent you? Tilda asked quietly. Minji's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. I didn't want to, but they said they'd hurt my family. They made me memorize what to say. Who are they? Busan Syndicate. They wanted to split you two up. Thought if you believed he got someone pregnant, betrayed you, you'd leave him. Then he'd be vulnerable. And the baby is my boyfriend's. We've been together for 3 years. They found out I was pregnant and saw an opportunity. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Tilda should have been angry, but she just felt tired. Tired of the games, the manipulations, the endless attempts to destroy their happiness. Does Ji-sung know about this? I was supposed to go to him next. Tell him, see if it drives a wedge between you. Instead, Tilda pulled out her phone and called him. He answered immediately, and she could hear the worry in his voice. Everything okay? I need you to come to my apartment. There's a woman here claiming she's pregnant with your child. A beat of silence. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He arrived in 8. Minji took one look at his face and started crying, apologizing in rapid Korean. Ji-sung listened to her story without interrupting, his expression growing colder and harder with each word. When she finished, he pulled out his phone and made a call. Tell your bosses it didn't work, he said in Korean, presumably to someone connected to the Busan Syndicate. Tell them I have Minji and her entire story recorded. Tell them if they ever threaten an innocent person again to get to me, I release everything I have on their operations to every law enforcement agency in Korea. Tell them I'm done playing these games. He hung up and looked at Minji with something between pity and anger. Where's your family?
Incheon.
They have my sister. Not anymore. Ji-sung made another call, this one to someone he clearly trusted. He rattled off an address and instructions. Within the hour, your sister will be safe and on her way to you. I'm also sending you money, enough to leave Seoul if you want or to start over here if you prefer. But this ends now. You're not their pawn anymore. After Minji left, escorted by one of Ji-sung's remaining loyal men, Tilda and Ji-sung sat in her apartment in silence. The weight of everything hung between them, all the near misses and manipulations and violence. I'm so tired, Tilda said finally. Me too. When can we leave? I can have everything arranged in a week. We fly to Tokyo first, then to Canada. I have contacts there, people who can help us establish new identities if we need them. We'll be gone before anyone realizes we're not just taking a vacation. What about your sister? I told her yesterday. She cried, but she understood. She always knew this was coming eventually. She just wanted me to be happy. He took Tilda's hand. Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no coming back. Korea will be a memory, not a home. It's never been my home, Tilda said. It's been a survival. I want a home. With you. Then that's what we'll build. The week passed in a blur of preparations. They sold what could be sold, packed what could be packed, destroyed what needed to be destroyed. Ji-sung liquidated his remaining business holdings, converting everything to cryptocurrency and offshore accounts that couldn't be traced or frozen. Tilda said goodbye to the few people she cared about, making up stories about job opportunities abroad, teaching positions in Canada that didn't exist but sounded plausible. On their last night in Seoul, they drove to Honggang Park, to the bench where they had sat on their first real date months ago. The river reflected the city lights like fallen stars, and the air smelled of autumn and possibility. Do you regret it? Ji-sung asked. Any of it? Tilda thought about everything they had been through. The fear and danger, the manipulations and attacks, the constant weight of his past pressing down on their present. Then she thought about the way he looked at her like she was the only real thing in his world. The way he had dismantled his entire life, just to build a new one with her. The way his hand felt in hers, solid and certain.
Not for a second, she said.
They sat there until the park closed, until the lights started going out across the river, until Seoul began its transformation from night to morning. Then they got in his car one last time and drove to the airport, leaving behind everything except each other. The flight to Tokyo was surreal, sitting in business class seats that reclined into beds, drinking champagne they hadn't paid for because Ji-sung had somehow upgraded them with points from a life they were leaving behind. Tilda looked out the window as Seoul disappeared beneath clouds and felt something uncurl in her chest. Relief, maybe. Or freedom. Or just the exhausting end of survival mode. In Tokyo, they stayed in a small hotel in Shibuya for 3 days, playing tourists, eating ramen at tiny shops, getting lost in the electric labyrinth of the city. It was their decompression chamber, the space between their old lives and their new ones. They didn't talk about the past or worry about the future. They just existed in the present, learning to be a couple without the weight of danger on their shoulders. On their 4th morning, they boarded a flight to Vancouver, and Tilda felt the last threads connecting her to her old life finally snap. She was free. They were free. Canada was cold and clean and impossibly green. They rented a small apartment in the suburbs, far from the Korean community downtown where Ji-sung might be recognized. They furnished it with IKEA furniture and second-hand finds, learning how to build a life from scratch without the shortcuts wealth provided. Ji-sung found work as a security consultant using a carefully curated resume that highlighted his strategic skills without mentioning their criminal origins. Tilda started selling her dresses online, slowly building a customer base one piece at a time. It wasn't easy. They fought sometimes, struggling to adjust to normal couple problems after everything they had survived. Ji-sung had nightmares about his old life, waking up convinced someone had found them. Tilda had days where the guilt of lying to her family ate at her until she couldn't function.
They were learning how to be people instead of survivors, and the process was messy and painful and necessary. But they were together. And slowly, day by day, they started to believe they would stay that way. 6 months after leaving Korea, Tilda woke to Ji-sung making breakfast in their tiny kitchen, humming off-key to a song on the radio. She watched him from the bedroom doorway, this man who had killed and threatened and ruled through fear, now struggling to flip pancakes in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt. And she felt something she hadn't felt in years.
Peace.
He looked up and caught her watching.
What?
Just thinking about how far we've come. He smiled and abandoned the pancakes to cross to her, pulling her into his arms. From Seoul's underworld to Vancouver's suburbs. It's been a journey. Worth it? Every second. He kissed her forehead. My sister's visiting next month, by the way. She wants to meet you properly. No more hiding, no more secrets. I'd like that. They ate terrible pancakes on their secondhand couch and made plans for the future. Small plans, human plans. A trip to Banff to see the mountains. A bigger apartment with room for a home office for each of them. Maybe someday a house with a yard, a dog, things that felt impossibly normal for people with their history. In the afternoon, Tilda video called her mother for the first time in months. She had finally told her family the truth, or a sanitized version of it. That she had been struggling in Korea, that she had met someone, that they had moved to Canada for a fresh start. Her mother had cried with relief to know her daughter was safe and in love and no longer lying. My baby, her mother said from the small screen, her lined face breaking into a smile. You look happy. Really happy. I am, Mama. I really am. After the call, Ji-sung found her standing by their apartment window, looking out at the ordinary suburban street with its ordinary houses and ordinary people living ordinary lives. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Penny for your thoughts. Just thinking about everything we survived to get here. All the pain and fear and danger. And how it was all worth it for this. For what? For boring. For normal. For standing in an apartment in Canada, watching people walk their dogs and arguing about what to have for dinner. For being alive and together and free. He turned her in his arms, so they were face to face. I love you, Tilda. I should say it more. I love you more than I ever thought I was capable of loving anything. I know. She touched his face. This face she had memorized in 1,000 moments of fear and hope. I love you too. Even when I probably shouldn't have. Even when it was dangerous and stupid and impossible. I love you. They stood like that as the afternoon sun slanted through their window, casting long shadows across their second-hand furniture and their hard-won peace. Outside, life continued in its ordinary way, people going about their days without knowing that 2 ghosts had found their way home. That night, after dinner at a neighborhood restaurant where no one knew their names or their history, they walked through their suburban streets hand in hand. The autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the smell of wood smoke and fallen leaves. It was so far from Seoul's neon and danger, from Gangnam's glitter and violence, that it felt like another universe. Maybe love wasn't meant to be perfect, Tilda said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. Maybe it was just meant to survive. Ji-sung squeezed her hand. Then we survived, didn't we? Against impossible odds and terrible choices, and everything that tried to tear us apart. We survived. Not just survived, Tilda corrected.
We lived.
We're still living. They walked until the streetlights came on, until their neighborhood transformed into a constellation of warm windows and safe homes. They walked past families having dinner and couples watching television and children being tucked into bed. They walked through a world that had no idea what they had sacrificed to reach it, what they had lost and found and fought for. And when they finally returned to their apartment, they stood on their small balcony and looked up at the stars. The same stars that had shone over Seoul and Gangnam and Itaewon, over alleyways and warehouses and all the places they had bled and cried and refused to break. Thank you, Ji-sung said quietly. For what? For seeing me when everyone else just saw a monster. For believing I could change. For choosing me when you could have chosen safety. Thank you for choosing me back, Tilda replied. for protecting me, for loving me enough to leave everything behind. It started to rain then, that soft, forgiving kind of rain that whispers of new beginnings and clean slates. They stayed on the balcony, letting it soak through their clothes, washing away the last traces of their old lives. And when they finally went inside, they were new people in a new world, carrying their scars but no longer defined by them. Love hadn't saved them from the storm, Tilda thought as she fell asleep in Ji-sung's arms that night. It had simply taught them how to stand in it together. And somehow, impossibly, they had made it through to the other side. Not unscathed but alive. Not perfect, but real. Not by themselves but together. And in the end, that was more than either of them had ever dared to hope for. It was everything. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button. Because everyone deserves a love that's worth fighting for. Drop a comment and tell me, would you risk everything for love? I'll be reading every single one. See you in the next story.